That could be a long story, but we're in public.
All right, good afternoon and welcome back. How was that break? Nice break, got some food and stuff like that. We good? We good? Let me know you're okay out there. Hey, I want to again thank each and everyone for coming out and being a part of the 2018 National Black Writers Conference, the 14th annual. So thank you so much for being a part of this event. I've been coming here for a number of years, probably maybe my 6th time coming to the National Black Writers Conference. Working with young people, most of my 20-year career of working with my organization, Say It Loud, Readers and Writers. Again, we celebrate our 20th year this year. Give me some love now. 20 years empowering the lives of young people. Check us out, speakloudly.com. We're having our last event coming up in April. You know, we made the 20-year celebration a long celebration, but again, we started 20 years ago from a $500 mini grant from the Arkansas Humanities Council, and Tony Medina was our special guest. So we've gone from a $500 mini grant to do a workshop with about 10 young people to now receiving grants and awards that, you know, are up to anywhere from $25,000 all the way up to $100,000. So over that 20-year period, we received millions of dollars in awards to work with young people. So I'm really excited about that work. So yeah, just check it out at speakloudly.com. So I want to bring to your stage, you know, some heavy hitters who are going to talk about the importance of the Black arts movement. I'm really excited about this particular panel because I've had the pleasure of also working at Third World Press. Hakeem Madabudu, who we can say was one of the primary members of the Black arts movement. So the Black arts movement means a lot to me because I always having every day going to work for 5 years, having to, you know, talk with Hakeem Madabudu about marketing, about promoting the Black arts movement. I mean, that was, you know, fantastic. I mean, stories like I think my 2nd week working there, Hakeem walked into my office, this beautiful office he gave me. Envy of in Chicago, this is a beautiful space. He came to my office and gave me a stack of books. Like, hey, we should check these books out, you know, to read, you know. And he shows up about a week later and want to talk to me about those books. So I knew then I'm in a special kind of place. So, you know, him just being one of the members of the Black Arts Movement, give you an idea of what type of dialogue that we're going to have today talking about the Black Arts Movement. So I'm going to welcome to the stage to you our moderator, who's going to be Eva Shockley. She's going to be joined by Michael Samanga and Greg Carr. And they're going to be joined by Sonia Sanchez a little bit later. So let's give it up for our moderator and panelists.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. I want to make sure these table mics are on. It is a true pleasure to be here among those who love Black writing, and to be in a true honor to be with the panel that I have the honor of moderating today. My name is Evie Shockley, and is it? Yeah, this is always the way with me. Okay. My name is Evie Shockley, and we are gathered here for a panel on the Black Arts Movement, a foundation for literature of resistance and activism. We, I hope in this room, all know the work of the Black Arts Movement, a moment in the 1960s and 70s with a long, long tail, a long trail of continuing influence on African American Black literature more broadly. This panel is going to think about how the work that came out in the sort of the prime moment of the Black Arts Movement can serve as a model and a guide and a beacon in many ways for those of us thinking about literature, resistance, and activism together today. So let me begin by introducing the panelists. I'll start with those that are here. And I think I will go ahead and introduce Sonia Sanchez now, and she'll be able to just slip in and join us when she arrives. So to my immediate left is Greg Carr. He is the chair of Afro-American Studies of the Afro-American Studies Department at Howard University and adjunct faculty at the Howard School of Law. He is first vice president of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations and editor-in-chief of The Compass, the journal of ASCAC. A former board member of the National Council for Black Studies, Dr. Carr has been named Professor of the Year several times by Howard students. He was also named 2013-14 HBCU Male Faculty Member of the Year at the 4th Annual HBCU Media Week Awards. Dr. Carr designed the curriculum framework for Philadelphia's mandatory high school African American history course and co-founded Philadelphia Freedom Schools. He blogs. You want me to give your blogging address?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay, so you'll have to write this down, but it's also in your program. He blogs at drgregcarr.com and on Twitter at AfricanaCarr, and can be reached at gcarr@howard.edu. All right, so why don't we give Dr. Carr a hand. And to my far left, we have Michael Samanga, who is an activist, scholar, writer, educator, and cultural worker who grew up in Detroit in the Black Power and Black Arts movement. He teaches African American Studies at Georgia State University, has written or edited several books, including No One Can Be at Peace Unless They Have Freedom, and Amiri Baraka and the Congress of African People. He has also directed and produced more than 200 artistic projects, including albums by Cassandra Wilson and his co-panelist, Sonia Sanchez. He lives in Atlanta with his wife, the, may I say, wonderful poet, Lita Hooper, and their children. So let's give him a hand. And a person who needs no introduction, but I will take the liberty of celebrating her, some of her accomplishments briefly. Now, poet, activist, scholar, Sonia Sanchez. She was the Laura Carnell Professor of English and Women's Studies at Temple University. She is the recipient of both the Robert Frost Medal for Distinguished Lifetime Service to American Poetry and the Langston Hughes Poetry Award, among many others. One of the most important writers of the Black Arts Movement, Sanchez is the author of 16 books, including Homegirls and Hand Grenades, Does Your House Have Lions, and Morning Haiku. Also, along with John Bracey Jr. and James Smithers, she co-edited SOS, Calling All Black People, a Black Arts Movement reader. I had the opportunity to speak with her last night, and she mentioned 4 recent honors and recognitions that she thought it would be important to share with you all today. She won the Poetry Society of America's Shelley Memorial Award in 2016, is going to receive an honorary degree from Swarthmore College this spring. Just last month here in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Museum, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women presented the 4th Annual Poetic Justice, Women, Power, Politics, and the Black Arts Movement as a celebration in her honor. And most recently, the documentary portrait of her life and work, Bad Sonia Sanchez, directed by Barbara Addy, Janet Goldwater, and Sabrina Schmidt-Gordon, was nominated for an Emmy in 2017. So we will have a chance, I think, to applaud her again later, but let's still give her a round of applause. So I have given my panelists, our panelists, a little bit of a heads up about 2 questions that are on the table, first and foremost, for our session. And I'm going to share those questions with you, and then they're going to spend about 10 minutes or so, giving you all a sort of a few remarks in response to those questions, and then we're going to have some time for discussion. So the two questions on the table in relation to the Black Arts Movement are, how has the literature of the Black Arts Movement provided a foundation for the discussion of race, resistance, and activism in the literature of contemporary Black writers? And just to add a little bit to that question, I was looking at the SOS Black Arts Movement reader last night, and it closes with an essay by Audre Lorde called Learning from the 60s. And in it she writes, as Black people, if there's one thing we can learn from the 60s, it is how infinitely complex any move for liberation must be. For we must move against not only those forces which dehumanize us from the outside, but also against those oppressive values which we have been forced to take into ourselves. Through examining the combination of our triumphs and errors, we can examine the dangers of an incomplete vision, not to condemn that vision, but to alter it, construct templates for possible futures, and focus our rage for change upon our enemies rather than upon each other. So another way of putting this question is, what are the triumphs or errors of the Black Arts Movement writing that we need to learn from to move forward? And the second question, more briefly, is, how have representations of race, ethnicity, resistance, and activism in the Black Arts Movement evolved and shifted since 1960? And I would just say, speaking with Sonia about this question last night, I think it's important to stress we're not talking about the Black Arts Movement changing necessarily, but how it's perceived or how it's been represented. But you all can take those questions wherever you see fit. So thank you.
Thank you. You want me to go first? All right. I did this so I can get out of Mike's way. Thanks, Dr. Shockley. Thanks, Evie. And good afternoon, everyone. My stopwatch, so I won't go over. Those two questions are obviously subject to such a range of interpretation. I think about Clyde Taylor's article in Ka from about 4 or 5 years ago, discussing what happens, quote unquote, after the Black Arts Movement. And every fall, I teach his book, Mask of Art, to a class we have at Howard called Black Aesthetics. And I think he's right in terms of, he says that in many ways, the Black Arts / Black Aesthetics conversation validated what becomes Black Studies. And, you know, Mike and I both work in departments, and my graduate degrees are in African American Studies, which makes me pretty much unemployable in the quote unquote white studies field, which is every other field. But that's a deliberate choice. And like the Black Arts Movement, which begins, and so I won't say begins, but which continues that ongoing critique of whiteness, critique of hegemony, the question then becomes, okay, as Sister Sonia would say, yeah, but how do it free us? So now that we've created some distance, oh, here she comes, perfect. Perfect. How indeed do we build those visions, as Larry Neal might say, of a liberated future? So the two questions that Evie gave us, that Professor Shockley gave us, you know, has the literature created this notion, you know, where we can get some distance and then think about this question of errors or triumphs, and then how have these representations been received? I think we have this continuing expansion of analysis of the period that in some ways has created a distance between the work itself and interpretations of the work that we might not be able to fold back in at this point. What do I mean by that? I was born and raised in the South, and grew up in the post-King South. You know, Dr. King, I was 3 when he was, you know, began to be beatified, and his funeral pyres were set on about 100 cities. But after that, he became a figure on a tin plate, church fans, and this kind of thing, you know. But in the 1970s, when I was growing up, he gets folded into a Black Power narrative of sorts. I mean, when you see Stevie Wonder with that Hot of July tour with Gil Scott-Heron and puts Happy Birthday on that album and then starts going around because they want that to be a national holiday. Well, black people are already taking it off. I understand Negroes are just not going to work. So, but that's really becomes a Black Power, Black arts thrust underneath what has been interpreted as a civil rights iconic figure. But he gets folded into the music of the 70s, the politics of the 70s. And so growing up in the South, we didn't have an intellectual understanding of the Black arts movement. I didn't know anything about Black Arts South or, anybody in New Orleans or anything was going on, Free Southern Theater. But I did know that we sang gospel in the church. Did not know that that same gospel music that we were singing that had kind of been invigorated and extended as a result of the Black arts movement really was only then beginning to find its way into HBCUs. This is the 50th anniversary, actually, this past week of the Howard students taking over the administration building, which led to the tour of the Black University Conference shortly thereafter. And they wouldn't let them Negroes play gospel music. And, they're too busy studying, the classics, classical music. But by the time I got into college, my major was theater. And, we did what Black college students did. We played Oedipus and Everyman and all that kind of stuff. But then we started doing Sam Art Williams and Woody King and Philip Hayes Dean, and some of these Black arts and Black arts influences, Alice Childress. We were too young to understand that that was not standard fare at HBCUs. And that the National Association for Dramatic and Speech Arts, which I think is meeting right now at Dillard as we're sitting here, they grew up, and those founders came up in a period when Black theater was really about mastering the European classics with a little Black garnishment. But the Black arts movement had shifted that whole paradigm. So by the time I got out of undergrad and went to law school, because we were going to fight to keep Black colleges Black. We thought Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 should be used as a weapon to keep Black colleges Black. So we thought we'd go to law school and become heroic lawyers. But I spent a summer here in New York. And spending the summer at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund is when I became aware of the Black arts movement by being in very close proximity and sitting under and listening to many of the elders who were still walking the earth, and many of them still walk the earth. But being in this space, and I thought, well then, and juxtaposing that against the structural nature of American racism and white supremacy as a global phenomenon, began to see the limits and the possibilities of this American project. But it was the Black arts movement. Hey, it's just like, come on, let's just pause here for a minute.
Woo.
You were somewhere else before this?
Well, it snowed, so I was supposed to do something in New Jersey at one of the colleges last night. And so they had to reschedule it, and they rescheduled it for 12 o'clock
No
today.
way. And you did it.
So I just, yeah, am I here?
See?
Sure did.
Shames us all. Well, shames me. I speak for myself. What's wrong with you? You slept. You went to sleep. Right. And so, to wrap this up, then this question of how we interpret is very important. I'll go back for a second. When I was an undergrad, 1984, I had a professor named Andrew Jackson who came in. He taught a class called Black Nationalism. We Southern Negroes. He puts on a John Coltrane record. Not any Coltrane record. I'm thinking, okay, now I know. Could have been a Love Supreme. Could have been, Song on Underground Railroad, the Africa Brass. I love that one. No, this Negro puts on Om. Now and then after it finishes, we all sit there and look at each other like, and he said, if you don't understand that, you don't understand Black nationalism. I guess we don't understand Black nationalism. But that became our kind of point of departure for thinking about what we didn't know and what we know. And that, following along the arc of student protest, we got caught up in the anti-apartheid movement. April Silver is here, April and Ross Baraka and all them, So I think that was really something that poured accelerant on the embers of the Black arts movement, because a lot of those young people were literally the children of that Black arts thrust. And it kind of brought us into it. And so now, when you take that past the 80s, which we now know as the golden age of hip hop, think about how it's narrated. When you get to now, looking back even at that moment when I was coming of age, and I look at our students, the students we have who walk in these halls and are at Howard and everywhere else, the blackness that is being celebrated, I think about Margaret Crawford's book, Post-Black Blackness. there's no one way to be black. And that's getting back mapped into narratives about the black arts movement. But for me, there is at its center an ideological thrust that I know I am still trying to figure out how to extend, an institutional thrust. It isn't an intellectual exercise, and I think the black arts movement now has been increasingly folded into an intellectual exercise. And that's on one end of the spectrum, one that's de-linked from institution building, so that it's kind of quaint for people to talk about institutions, black institutions. There was in a moment, and then people, you know, what's my man's, they wrote that book, We Are an African People. It'll come to me in a minute. John Rickford. Read a whole book about the Council of Independent Black Institutions and all these black schools as if the story is over, and then the end folded into a narrative on American democracy. I'm like, nah, dude. Some of us still got our fists balled up. You know what I'm saying? So when you're playing that music, when you're looking at that art, when you listen to that poetry, when you put on Last Poets record or Watts Prophets, or you're reading some, you know, Mari Evans or Sonia Sanchez, we're thinking, okay, again, that question that Sonia raised, yeah, but how do it free us? Sitting in Black Panther, I'm like, for Wakanda, yeah, but how do it free? Now, it could free us. It could. We were talking about that before. It could be a vision of a liberated future, but ultimately there is an ideological thrust underneath that. And I think that interpretations of the black arts movement have increasingly become kind of an intellectual exercise when you combine that with everything from vulgar careerism to this is my niche, I'm working on. What are you working on? Do you know any black people? Do you spend any money with black people? Do you work in any independent black institutions? I don't see the point. Right. But I'm going to tell you the point. The point is John Bolton about to get us in a nuclear war. Because people with institutions never forget the intellectual thrust of their institutions. And what folks were struggling against in the 60s and the 70s, what they were struggling against in the 30s and 40s, what they were struggling against in the 1870s and 80s, when you go back and read the Christian Recorder and the Amy Church Review, what they were struggling against in the 1820s and 30s, when you read Freedom's Journal or look at what Martin Delaney was doing in the Pittsburgh Mystery or Douglas in the North Star, what they were doing is struggling against institutions and trying to figure out how to carve a little space to operate. So to me, I'll stop with that because I've been going 9 minutes and 59, now 10 minutes exactly. So I'll stop and then we'll have some time to talk about it. But ultimately, I think we can't evade the ideological question that's at the heart of the black arts movement, and that's a living tradition. It didn't stop anywhere. It's still going on. So I'll stop.
I should have went first. To follow along the same lines, I just want to point out several things about the black arts movement that we should take note of. It's the most influential artistic movement in the history of America. Don't believe it, research it. There's no other movement, and it's a multidiscipline movement. We focus a lot on the literature, but it's a multidiscipline movement of visual artists, musicians, dancers, theater artists, all kinds of folks. So that's the first thing. It is the most influential artistic movement in the history of America. Why do I say that? Because it inspired similar movements in communities all over this country. Because the black arts movement poets are the most famous poets in America. Now, a famous poet in America is known in universities and poetry circles. The black arts movement poets are known by people who pick up the garbage. They're known by people who teach your children. They're known by cooks in restaurants. Not because they have their books necessarily, some of them do, but because they know that this voice emerged that was speaking from, to, and about them. Which brings me to the second point. The black arts movement is a question, as Brother Carr just said, of ideology, which essentially is a question of where you stand. Paul Robeson said, the artist must choose slavery or freedom. I have made my choice. Here I stand. The black arts movement, in Larry Neal's seminal essay, The Black Arts, says that the black arts are decidedly political. They are the aesthetic and spiritual sister of the black power movement. Meaning that the black arts movement demands that the artists take a stand. Whose side are you on? And just as an aside, to give you an example, since we're coming up on the 50th anniversary in a week or so of the assassination of Dr. King, Martin Luther King was a privileged Negro from Atlanta, from a very prominent Negro preaching family. Had an extraordinary education. 15 years old, went to Morehouse, went to seminary, got a PhD in philosophy. All of these things that prepared him to continue to be a privileged Negro in Atlanta. At some point, he would take over his father's church, Ebenezer. History sent him to Montgomery to pastor the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And he wound up in a situation where he had to choose, was he going to go back to Atlanta and maybe become the president of Morehouse like his mentor Benjamin Mays, or whether he was going to stand with working class black people. He begins his public career in Montgomery fighting for working class black people, cooks, laborers, people who worked with their hands. And he dies 13 years later standing with working class black people in Memphis. Now, even if he had led the privileged life as an advocate from the pulpit for justice and freedom, that's not the same thing as taking a stand that risks your privilege and possibly your wealth and even your life. And so the Black Arts Movement calls artists, these extraordinary group of talented black people, to take a stand. Who are you standing with and who are you writing about and for? And what will it cost you if you do this? Well, we know the cost was high for a lot of these people. They couldn't get jobs in universities because they had the audacity to tell the truth. Some of them were fired from jobs. Some of them were harassed by people like the FBI, who's crying tears right now about how they're being harassed by the president. They don't like it, do they? Yeah, we didn't either. So the Black Arts Movement, the most influential artistic movement, demands that people take a stand. And in that stand, it demands that there be the creation of an aesthetic, a black aesthetic, an aesthetic that grows out of the experience, the culture, the history, the magic, as young people say today, of black people. Kalama Ya Salam, a Black Arts Movement poet out of New Orleans, just published a new book through Third World Press called The Magic of Juju. Because what is called for is that this thing inside of us serve us, not just serve corporate interests, not just serve a narrative that oppresses us. And so within that, as Sister Shockley just read from Audre Lorde, it also requires us to dig deep in ourselves because like the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power Movement, the conventional narrative is that this was a movement of men with women kind of helping them in the background. And it is important as we struggle against our own marginalization as a people that we fight against that within ourselves, both the inter-community and the intra-community. And the Black Arts Movement actually demands this, and sisters in the Black Arts Movement to this day have continued to fight to make sure that the voice of women, the narrative of women in this movement are lifted up for all time. Sonia Sanchez is probably the most famous of the women poets of the Black Arts Movement. And the point I made earlier about known by people, I've been with her in all kinds of situations where ordinary people come up to say, Miss Sanchez, particularly sisters, young sisters especially, your poetry changed my life. And I've been around a lot of other poets, and I ain't never seen nobody come up to them and say, your poetry changed my life. Unless it was maybe, you know, somebody that heard Billie Holiday and said, I heard Billie Holiday and it changed my life. But not a poet that calls himself a poet. And so it is important that the stand for black people has to be a stand for all black people. We can't love Audre Lorde and hide the fact that she was a lesbian. We can't love James Baldwin and hide the fact that he was a homosexual. We have to stand for all black people. And actually, the Black Arts Movement, in redefining the aesthetic, you read that Larry Neal essay, he talks about this, that we don't have the time, the opportunity to try to live an aesthetic that is actually an instrument of our own oppression. Who are you? This is a central question of oppressed people all the time. Who are you in the context of where you are? African Americans have been struggling with this question of our identity since we got here. What's your name? Kunta Kinte. No, it ain't. It's Toby. What's your name? This is why the project to rescue Africa, which shows up in the Black Arts Movement, is important. That's why viscerally so many black people responded to Wakanda. Because even those who've never read about Africa, deep down in our soul, we know that the narrative of Africa is a lie. And the need for the advanced civilizations to be raised up as a part of our heritage, as a part of our DNA, even those who had never worn African clothes before, as Greg was saying, you know, went and bought some Chinese-made dashikis. Because on a visceral level, we need our own voice. And the Black Arts Movement declared this openly, that we will speak for, from, to, and about not only black people's condition, but envision a future that comes out of a black existence. I'm gonna stop here because we need to hear from someone. Thank you.
Sister Sonia, you've already been introduced and showered with a little applause twice. Would you be ready to go ahead and jump in on...
I just hope you don't mind if I just read something, okay? Because, and then maybe just talk back and forth. To begin, because I think I'm reading actually from a book that we, oh, thank you. Can you hear? Hey, how you doing? Thank you for coming out. No, really, thank you for coming out to this conference, you know, every year. It is an important conference, I think, you know, and you know, and although people come out just because their favorite person is here or their favorite writer is here, you know what I mean? You know, every year. So you don't always come, but just the idea of this is really the whole point of black arts, is it not? The idea that John Killens, you know, would begin something such as this, right? You know, and it's with, you know, under the context of like, hey, who would have thought that you would have had a conference about black literature, people? Huh? And about black artists, talking about it, examining, you know, talking about the geniuses who involved themselves with it. And this man, John Killens, did that. And that's why you're here. You're sitting because someone had the foresight, you know, the vision to say simply, no, we need a conference on black literature, do we not? Just as one day, geez. Just as one day, I received a letter in the mail from someone by the name of Leroy Jones, who said, he sent a letter to all artists saying, let us continue Malcolm's work. Isn't that something? So you really cannot talk about the black arts unless you mention someone by the name of Malcolm also too, and John Coltrane. If you do, you know, you probably need to dip back and say, you know, who were they? What did they do? Because the whole point of us is that we do know, do we not, you know, that some of these ideas were floating around before we got into something called the black arts, right? You know, and some of the ideas and some of the music from Coltrane and Malcolm, you know, and if we want to talk about the fathers then at that point, right, we've got to talk about Coltrane and Malcolm. The irony was that by the time you want to take it to another step, they're both dead. Isn't that something? They're both dead. So then who's going to begin to talk about this blackness? You know, who's going to at some point say what this blackness is, and who's going to identify this blackness, and then, and above all, who's going to do something with these people who call themselves black folks, right? You know, because we were saying, I got on stage, I'm a black woman, and people were, I'm a Negro with a capital N, you know. And I said, yeah, they finally capitalized it at some point, did they not, you know? After people fought to have it capitalized. They still ain't capitalizing black when it refers to a human being, right? But that's a whole other different story, is it not? But you know, and I know basically what that meant. that at some point, we all came together and a similar book, Black Fire, was done, at that particular time. And another similar book was a book done by Dudley Randall, which was Remembering Malcolm, right? The death of Malcolm. So all those things converged at one point. Here we were looking at an anthology of Malcolm by Dudley Randall and Sister Margaret Burroughs, right? Oh, and Black Fire, Larry Neal and Leroy Jones. It's funny how you forget people's names, right? Because he's Baraka, is he not? And those books are there, and they're announcing stuff, and they're saying stuff. And at some particular point, you have to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with this? And he sends out letters to all of the artists that he knew, saying, come and help us to continue Malcolm's work. So I just want to start off and jump off at that point, perhaps. Frantz Fanon said, what is needed is to hold oneself like a sliver to the heart of the world, to interrupt, if necessary, the rhythm of the world, to upset, if necessary, the chain of command ellipsis, but to stand up to the world. I do battle for the creation of a human world, that is, a world of reciprocal recognition. Jose Marti wrote, in the world there must be a certain degree of honor, just as there must be a certain degree of light. When there are many men and women without honor, there are always others who bear in themselves the honor of many men and women. How to tell you of peace, change, hope, of racial and sexual and economic injustice of an America rising up out of an aristocracy of death. See, you forget that, that this country rose up out of an aristocracy of death, people. Death, of death. An aristocracy of slavery, racism, an aristocracy of color, an aristocracy of corporate greed, an America that made Langston Hughes write, we the people must redeem our land and make America, America again. How to tell you about lives winning on hairpins, of a country needing pause from people to live. Step right up, I say step right up. A good sail on legs today, eyes today, hands today, kidneys today, hearts today, history today, integrity today, truth today, families today. How to tell you of a country that will not recognize the two most important revolutions that were rooted in a cultural base, Cuba and Haiti. These two countries symbolize a regional process of struggle and liberation of the mind, which must be an essential part of our journey towards the fulfillment of the Western integrity. How to tell you of progress, so we move beyond a politician saying Cuba and Haiti, and everyone has the automatic voice of Washington shouting communism, continuing the blockade, boat people, AIDS, poverty, but never the eloquent and graceful poetic voice of Marti, the spiritual father of the Cuban Revolution, who said as he observed the conduct of the U.S. delegation in 1889 at the Monetary Congress of the American Republic, and I quote, they believe in need, in the barbarous right as the only right. This will be ours because we need it. Almost 100 years later, after the invasion of Grenada by 6,000 U.S. soldiers, the U.S. Secretary of State, George Shultz, arrived, and his first observation was complete. He said, this is a delicious piece of real estate. How to tell you of walking, climbing the citadel in Haiti, and hearing the footsteps of a people, a country crying out for liberty, economic justice, equality, and change. How to really make you understand that it's the poets as prophets, as teachers, as visionaries, as activists, as writers who sing of peace, racial and social and sexual and economic justice. How to make you remember Baraka in his 1965 poem, Black Art, declaring, we want poems that kill, ellipsis. We want a black poem of a black world, or Larry Neal's ellipsis. And then there is jail. America is the world's greatest jailer, and we are all in jails. Black spirits contain little magnificent birds of wonder. How to make you remember James Baldwin, a man Baraka called God's black revolutionary mouth, who said in 1979 in a New York Times article, and I quote, if black English isn't a language, then tell me what is. Baldwin said, it goes without saying that language is the most novel and crucial key to identity. It reveals the private identity and connects one with or divorces one from the larger public or communal identity. How to make you hear your heart sounding, pounding out what W.B. Du Bois wrote, this is a beautiful world. This is a wonderful America. which the founding fathers dreamed into their sons and daughters, drowned it in the blood of slavery and devoured it in greed. Greed. How to make you remember the sister poets singing of the workers with words that had the scent of the earth and the genius of the stars. How to make you store in your blood the memory of black women's voices, Jordan, Fields, Cortez, Clifton, Evans, Fabio, Angelo, Lord, Giovanni, Rogers, Sanchez, linking continents, making the country and the world abandon closed minds, spreading themselves rainbow-like across seas. Their voices stalking the morning stars as they helped a generation of young people begin to question their silence, their poverty, their scarcity, their greed. They helped us all ask the most important question we can ask ourselves: what does it mean to be human in the 20th and 21st century? How to make you continue to lift your eyes off the ground into a higher ground of living, of being, and loving. How to make you remember the poets coming behind us in 1989, Public Enemy, 1989, The Number, Another Summer, Get Down, Sound of the Funky Drummer, Music Hitting Your Heart, 'Cause I Know You Got Souls, Got to Give Us What We Want, Got to Give Us What We Need, hey, our freedom of speech is freedom of death, we got to fight the power. That be, let me hear you say, fight the power. Can you say it? No, can you say it?
Fight the power!
No, do you really mean it?
Yeah.
Or do you really mean fight the power till I get in power? Fight the power till I make my million. Do I be like, Trump? If you cursing Trump, he's a billionaire. That sucker is a billionaire. The 1% of billionaires control you, and they still think they control our minds also, too. The black guy said, no, you don't, motherfucker. You don't control my mind. That's what we said. And people said, by golly, by gee, you don't curse anymore, Professor Sanchez. I said, no, I don't. At some point, we had to call them motherfuckers because they were motherfuckers, There's no getting around that, whatever. You might have to reintroduce motherfucker, because we got a big one up here, And the people who have been brought into the circle of the White House are people who have never been in there at all before because they were alienated from the rest of the country. They had alien ideas about America. They had alien ideas about black folks. They had alien ideas about yellow folks. They had alien ideas about the world. And here they is, like that little girl said, here we is, well, here they is, right? They is here to take us back to a point and a period that you must begin to understand. If this conference accomplishes nothing, you got to stop hating people. You got to stop hating your own people. You got to stop gossiping about people. You got to cut off the idiot box when those women get on and those men get on about, the housewives of Atlanta, the housewives of New York, the housewives of San Fran and whatever. You got to turn the channel. Because who cares what they got on? Who cares what they are talking about? They are not talking about us. We are in deep trouble right now. And unless we acknowledge that, and you got to acknowledge it in your classrooms, you can't go in saying, well, Professor Sanchez, I can't say anything in the class because I'm up for tenure. I said, we're all up for tenure, motherfucker. You know what I mean? Whatever, I was up for tenure. My father said, Sonia, if you would just stop talking about these things, this stuff out there, just teach the literature, just teach the poetry, just teach that, and you'll be okay. You'll be okay. But how can you just teach it? I said, well, the way I teach it, it's not just teaching the poetry. It is teaching what is underneath the poetry, what is here in this country right now, the reasons why we had, indeed, the great writers coming out of the Harlem Renaissance, right? And those great writers around the people of the Harlem Renaissance, what did they, because they looked at America and said, you ain't America to me. That's right. And I've got to make you America. And I can't do that by just going out, getting a job, and making money, and then moving to Oost-Kush someplace, whatever, et cetera, and thinking at some point and saying that Harlem does not exist, that we let Harlem be sold from underneath our feet. We let the politicians do that. We let the politicians do that. They have taken Harlem, that we black folks cannot live in Harlem. Oh, no. If you're retired, you cannot live. I had to leave. You can't live if you're retired in a place called Harlem because you can't afford it. That's real. How do we give up something that said us? Harlem said us, did it not? Oh, yes, it did.
Yes.
Harlem said us. But you know, I don't know if there's something basic in us as a people at some point that we really think. The thing that I am stricken at is that when I'm talking to people and when they begin to talk against people who have worked hard in our movement, you know, and I am stricken by that. I am stricken by the idea that we really do believe that if I do that, then I can make it up there someplace, right? You know, and I don't need the person behind me that I'm talking about. We got to teach our children when people come in, they come in and start talking about people, you got to stop them. And you got to say, we don't gossip in our house. You know, we don't talk against our own people. We can differ with our own people, but we don't talk against our own people. We don't hate our own people. You understand that? We are not, in quotes, back there on plantation, supposedly, right? You know, where we have to turn in a Nat Turner. We got to report on these people when they lead insurrections and all. That at some point we've got to say and come together as a people and with other people. Not only is we here, but we are not going to be pushed down again. That we are not going to be a people who are not going to survive and do more than surviving. You know, that, you know, at some point, Du Bois, I forget the name of the book and the article we did it in, but Du Bois wrote in the 1930s, you know, about what Garvey had done. And he began to talk about, you know, we really do need to have businesses in our community. You all remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I thought to myself as I read it and taught it to my students, why in God's name did they not do it and come together? You know, why did one have to say, look at all those white folks in the NAACP? They weren't white, they was just black, they was just yellow.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Whatever, you know. But the point is that, you know, this thing that we tried to do also in the black arts was to get rid of that kind of non-morality that we had about each other. You understand what I'm saying? You know, that we had to at some point say, no, we is all here together. And that was so important to me, and I'm not too sure that, you know, we were successful with it, but we certainly did begin. I got up from many a table when people started to talk about any of my sisters. And the brother talked about this whole idea about the women writers. At one of the African conferences about 20-some-odd years ago, some of you might have been there, I was asked to do a paper on the black women writers because they were coming into this prominence, right, as such. And I said, sure, I will do that. And I got up on stage, you know, Addison Gale was there, and all these other people was packed. And I started to read, and the African scholar stood up and said, shut up. And I stopped for a minute, and then I started up again. And as I went on again, he said, I said, shut up. And I stopped for a minute, and I looked at my sisters looking at me, and they were all seated. And I stopped, and I started again, and he stood up, and Addison Gale, the great critic, said, oh man, let her say something. We don't know anything about what those women are doing. Did you hear that? And so I finished that paper, and there was this barely whatever, and I got off. And I was not invited back to that conference every year until I just went last year, 20-some-odd years later. And I don't let people forget stuff. You all know that. I stood up and said, how nice of you to invite me to this conference. I haven't been here in years. In fact, at that time I had on my paper 20-some-odd years. I said, you know, and the last time I was here was 23 or 24 years ago. But thank you for remembering me again. And I gave my paper, you know. I could have gotten up there and cursed everybody out, but why? But the point was to say simply that I'm hoping you've grown. Because my paper was about the women writers. My paper also included lesbians, whatever, you know. And it was at that conference when I got ready to read that I did a litany of names, whatever, which included lesbians, you know, and gay men, right? And so white men. John Brown, I thought was important to put in there, you know. And there was some slight boos, like, why do you include a white man? Why not? If he's going to fight for me, I'm going to include his ass. You better believe it. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm talking about. So don't come here saying, I want to find out what them people did in the black arts because I want to be that. No, you ain't going to be that. You don't need to go back that far. You need to build on what people did. You need to take it to another level, a high level. You don't need to go back. You need to read it. And one of the things that we did here in this book is that we did not say simply that everybody was writing here, but we gave you all that was done. And you could choose and take from it the parts that would work in 2018 at this particular point. Because you're not going to go through some of the stuff we went through. You understand what I'm saying? That was that kind of reality. And my father said to me constantly, you know, Sonia, 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 just stop talking about all that black stuff, you know. And I said, Dad, you know, and we had hard times together. I said, Dad, you know, if I were to do that, I could not teach if I left it out. I cannot teach without talking about what we must do, whatever. But what he was saying is that you will not have a job in suppose the most liberal city in America, New York City, and that's true. They put my behind out. They said, you will not get a job in New York City talking what you're talking, and challenging us, challenging the power. That's what we did, those students. We challenged the power of a university to say who would be the person who would run the black studies, right? That we challenged the idea, did we not, of like, you're sending people to Europe, students to Europe and to Latin America, and when the students ask to go to Africa, you say no? So what did I do? We had a meeting. You know, I was their advisor. I said, you know, they're going to those places on your money. That's student money, right? So I said, what we do, and you all should think about this. Now, this is one thing you might keep. I said, we want to go and ask them for our money.
That's right.
Take our money out of that general fund, and we'll take that money and go to Africa. That's why they put my behind out and wouldn't hire me again, because we started touching the money.
That's right.
We took the money, do you hear that? Out of that fund and said, this is our money there. You're not going to send people to Europe on our money, but we are indeed going to go to Africa on this money. So I'm just saying at some point, there's some things we can indeed learn from what happened and what didn't happen. I want to just end by saying, as James Stewart, the black critic, wrote, I don't know if you ever read Jimmy Stewart, you should read him, a brilliant man. As James Stewart, the black critic, wrote, man, woman cannot create a forever, but he can only create forever. But he can only create if she creates as change. Creation is the self-perpetuation. Change is being. The question of art is dialectical. Art goes. Art is not fixed. Art cannot be fixed. Art is change, like music, poetry, and writing are when concerned. They must move, sway, not necessarily as physical properties, but by their nature, but they must go spiritually. As we people, lovers and workers of change, must go out into this world spiritually. And if we do, it will get better. Yeah, I just wanted to read just a little excerpt just to you know, to bounce off what you said, okay? Thank you. I hope there were no children in here when I got dramatic.
It's all right.
They didn't hear anything they needed me to hear.
We love you, Sonia.
Yeah.
I love you. You know, I love you, and I see these brothers, you know, from that movement, you know. The point is, the thing that I did not say that I got sidetracked is that when you read all of these people, the common denominator is love. Mm-hmm. It's love. It was not hate for America, love for our ancestors, love for the people who lived, love for those people who, you know, who decided to build. I was in France and someone said to me, whoa, your people are really some interesting people. If we had gotten out of slavery, we would have gone and killed everybody in sight. What did? We We came out of our enslavement period, and what did we do? We built. Isn't that amazing? We built schools. We built houses, you know. We built churches. We built, you know. And we mustn't forget that we built, and we can still build again if you truly understand. We built. We didn't kill people, you know, not at all, you know. And in building, you know, we understood that we did it together, you know, and we supported each other. We built communities that they destroyed. We went and built another community. I think Margaret Walker's book, Jubilee, shows us that, you know, when they came out of their enslavement period, you know, they went, you know, and they went down to the corner store, and they put on credit, and they got the beans and stuff they needed, and they, you know, and they came back to the store, and she could write because she had been a house Negro, right, you know? And she came and she said to the man, like a human being says, oh, by the way, you loaned us this, but this and this, and you owe us $300. And the man said, oh, no, you owe me $500. They understood what that was. You know what? They went back, and then they did better. They worked harder, you know, and she worked with a baby on her back. They worked and came back, and she said, to her husband, we got this one. And she goes in and she says, oh, we did this, and you owe us now, you know, only $250, right? He said, no, you owe me $500. What did they do? In the middle of the night, they got in that, they put their bed in there, they got their children, and they went off in the night, you know, and they left that area and went to another place where they could live as human beings, whatever. You know, but what's significant about that? They had to leave because they were not organized. They had to leave because they didn't have a community of people just like them, you know. So if we have a community of people just like us who can protect us, we don't have to get up in the middle of the night and go out, you know, and move on and go to the next spot and hope that it'll work with everybody else, you see. Yeah.
Sonia, let me...
Yes.
One of the tenets of the Black Arts Movement was institutional development.
That's right.
People were not waiting to be funded to form a theater company. In fact, at the height of the Black Arts Movement, there were more than 200 theater companies, black theater companies in this country. There's less than 20 now.
And that's why the government started funding, I'm sorry.
Right. In fact, there's a recent report on how black bookstores were targeted by the FBI. No question. As an institution created by black people to disseminate the literature and culture of black people. Theater companies, dance companies, galleries, the Studio Museum of Harlem. One of its founders, Ed Spriggs, who's a Black Arts Movement artist out of the West Coast, who's a visual artist and a filmmaker. I also started an institution in Atlanta, if any of y'all have been there, called the Hammond's House Museum for African American Culture and History. But the building of institutions, Third World Press just celebrated its 50th anniversary, one of the last standing independently owned black publishing companies in this country. If not for Third World Press and Black Classic Press and Broadside Press and these other independent press, Margaret Burroughs was Lotus Press, without those presses, many of the voices that we revere and are influenced by their works would not have ever made it into print. This was before the digital age where you could print your own stuff and get it out in the way that people get it out now. And yet, we still feel more validated.
That's right.
If Simon & Schuster publishes us.
That's right.
We feel like if we get published by Third World Press, that's kind of like, I ain't really in the real publishing world. Now, I don't have anything against people getting published by big publishers. I think that's important to get stuff out too. What I am saying though is you take somebody like Gwendolyn Brooks, the poet laureate of Illinois, who in the Black Arts Movement decides she would never be published by a white publishing company again and is only published by independent black publishers until she dies. So what does that do? It sends a signal of the value of the institution that we own, but it also sends a signal that I'm going to lend my celebrity and my gifts and talents to help sustain an institution that we need so that our voice will be heard. There are so many writers that without Third World Press would never have been published. And so many important classic books that would not be republished if it weren't for Black Classic Press. So we have to support these institutions. And we have to fight for space in these other institutions too, but we have to support those that are independent black institutions.
It's a two-pronged approach, right?
Say again?
Two-pronged approach,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
Or multi-pronged. I know that Brother Carr has not had a chance to come back.
Taking notes.
Well, So you may be able to share some.
Could I comment
too.
on this brother? This brother came to a place called Temple University, and it was amazing just to see him. You know how you know, and you know this too, Brother Michael, because you're a child of our movement.
Right.
You know, you could look up and you can see the people who are the children of a movement, the Black Arts Movement. Because I always will stop and just ask, any little dumb question just to see how they answer it, right? And see what they do. But I also watch what people do. And this brother, began to teach students outside the classroom before he even became that professor, that teacher. And that was beautiful, And this brother Michael, every time he called me, he said, "We're going to go on a march, Sonia." And I said, "Where are we going this time, Michael?" "We're going down in Mississippi, and it might be a little dangerous." I said, "Well, where have you taken me that it has not been dangerous?" Right.
And yet she kept coming.
No question.
Always came when we called.
No question. No question. You can add this very quickly. I want to, because Sister Sonia does never forget anything. I want to take this opportunity to say that at a dissertation defense at Temple, Regina Jennings, who, I guess she's still at Rutgers. I don't know if she's still.
I don't know. I don't think so.
She wrote her dissertation on Sister Sonia, Malcolm, Hakeem Abuti, and I was a graduate student, fired up. So I asked the question. I said, "Well, what institutions has Sonia Sanchez built?" And it was such a stupid question. Because at that point, I hadn't yet understood the nature of institutions the way I understand it now. And not realizing that Temple became your institution. That the institution was the living communities, the intellectual work, not just Temple, but Philadelphia, because New York's loss was Philadelphia's gain. I was in Philly last weekend for a conference, and you see the fingerprints of Sonia Sanchez all over the place, and they're intergenerational fingerprints. The Black Star Film Festival, the young sisters who started that, they came out of that Temple conversation, out of that Philadelphia conversation. And I wanted to say that very quickly in the nature and the concept of institutions, because Dr. Green's sitting there. We're beginning to Doc, leaf through some of the work of the Institute for the Arts and Humanities, Stephen Henderson. And of course, Dr. King is killed, and some of those black students at Spelman and Morehouse and Morris Brown and ITC come together and say, we should rename this whole complex to Martin Luther King University. Well, the Negroes weren't gonna have that. But Vincent Harding takes over what becomes the King Center, and not able to realize a larger vision, he starts something called the Institute of the Black World, and a lot of y'all have been involved with that. Right. And he picks this English professor out of Morehouse, Stephen Henderson, sends him north to D.C., because after those students have taken over, and I know it's a big, how ironic is it, that's right, Mike, how ironic is it that an institution that has been challenged by its own people turns around, waits 50 years, and starts publishing books on the challenge. This is what's happening at Columbia now. Y'all seen all this stuff come out, Columbia University Press on Columbia 1968. I'm like, wait, right. You just wait. Right. Gramsci calls it resistance and incorporation. You wait and you can absorb enough resistance. So all these university press books about things that people were trying to destroy just tickle me. But in 1974, at Howard, a Negro college that had been challenged to become a black institution, the young president, James Cheek, brought in Andrew Billingsley, who then began to assemble some young black faculty, Ron Walters, Joyce Ladner, a bunch of other people, and try to build out that black university. Well, one of the people he was recruiting was Stephen Henderson. That's right. Plucked a guy named Charles Harris from Random House, Toni Morrison, then, continues her work there, but to start something called Howard University Press, for this exact reason. He was battled against by some of the Negroes at Howard who still walk the earth. We say this in love. We do. No, we do. We say it in love because, we all want to win, but some people don't think we can win. So they start making deals. And the argument was a black college shouldn't have a press. It's not yet developed as a full university. But Harris was like, I've run press. Look, I know how to run a press. We're going to start a press. So they bring in, they start publishing stuff. Let me stop right here and say that John Killens was in those writers' conferences. Right. Sonia Sanchez, Mari Evans. You see, you talked about Baba Kalamu. Tony Cade. This stuff, Eleanor Traylor, who's still, punching with both fists in D.C.
Great trick.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Toni Morrison. Yeah. Please, but anyway, I just want to say that this extends that, because what happens is that institution missed, but that spirit is here because King Killens comes here And this is the extension of that thrust. So we can't do anything but thank you for that.
But we have to redefine institutions.
Yes, exactly.
You know, and the point is that what I understood at some point is that the people became the institutions. You got to understand that. You know, we didn't have to have a building someplace, right, and say, here's a name, and we're getting this, whatever. What was tricky about us, and that's what the country understood, the country is not stupid. It has not stayed empowered all this power, all this long, that they understood that we became the institutions, you know, and so we turned out, you know, I mean, I go, every place I go, there are some people that we train who are now in these universities, you know, or in charge of institutions also, you know, but they're not the institution, you know. They bring with them the ideas that they got from that black arts, you know, and the people, and that's what we're talking about. You've got to become the institutions. Every place you walk, every place you spit, you know, every place you decide to make a turn or dance, you know, get down and cry and scream, you know, you are the institution that at some point, you know, people think it's a building, you know, a modern art building, you know, these museums. No, 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 no. We are indeed the institutions, and we've got to understand this. Whatever we do, whatever we say, it goes out from where we are, and we go, and people then can go into an institution, you know, and begin to change it. But if you see yourselves also as the institutions, you know, we don't need the buildings, you know, to do this work, you see. Or we might do the work within the building. I mean, I knew Temple University was not, you know, a black university, but I also knew that a black university would not hire me.
That's right. That's
you know,
exactly
we
right.
knew that. We weren't crazy,
That's
okay,
exactly,
whatever.
Exactly right.
And we knew at some point then, how then can we take those black students who are here and those white students who are here? People don't understand that.
Right.
You know, the thing about students that is so amazing, and the thing about us as we developed, that, you know, we understood this human condition, that when people came into our classroom, we taught them. Because the point is we were going to change everybody, you know, primarily the black students, right? But any white student, you know, any Latino student, any Chinese student, anybody who came under my tutelage, right? You know, to this day I see them and they're doing the work. They are the institution in those suckers, in those places that they be.
That's right.
And that's what's important for us to understand, you know. Let's not get caught in a building someplace, whatever. Because, you know, even though there was a black studies at Temple, you know, they didn't own, that was not their turf, you know what I mean? But they did do some interesting things, you know, there, and they did turn out, you know, people that I know, students that I know who have become fantastic leaders, fantastic writers, fantastic, you know, people who decide to change the world, and they're working in different places. That's what that's all about, you see. But, you know, Temple was not a black university, never was a black university. But we black folks, any place we've been, we got to settle in. Wherever you are, you got to settle in. So, well, here I is. Whoa, now, you know, now, what can I take from this place, right? You know, and then what can I take to take out to my people, you know, and how can I bring other people into this sucker, to this place also too, and let us move? I mean, you know, we have to change this idea, you know, that only work gets done in institutions, because this country can take over any institution it wants to. Make no mistake about it, whatever. So we have to be, you know, itinerant. you know, like, oh, you're here, I'm going to move a little bit over here, whatever. And I know you won't come here because it's the bottom. You know what I mean? You know, I know you don't want to be here with me. So anyway,
That's right.
Along, yes.
Let me offer the chance to the people who is. Hello.
I guess you said it's the last time I'll sit with them people.
No. I just know that there are questions out here that you all will be able to respond to in a way that will let you still make the points that you are burning to make. So if you have a question, there are mics in the aisles. You should stand on up. Or if you can shout. Yeah.
Can't hear you.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay.
Say your name.
Okay.
Oh, wow, wonderful.
Say your name.
Lida Colon. I'm a graduate student at LIU. I wanted to ask, because similarly to you, Ms. Sanchez, I get into it with my father, and he says you need to just calm down a little bit, and then you won't have a hard time getting assistantships or fellowships or you know, applying for your PhD or whatever it is. And I feel very consumed by that fear and that worry. And so I wanted to ask everyone on the panel, because you all in different ways and in similar ways have been pushing against the system and hegemony and white supremacy, and tenure is always, you know, it's a question, and you need to eat. So, so my question is, what has the experience of losing a job been like, and where do you find, how do you assuage those fears? How do you handle that?
When I couldn't get a job in my hometown, New York City, Joe Papp put on a play of mine called Sister Sonji, and someone from Amherst College saw it, a dean or the provost, I'm not sure which, and I was down to probably about $100 in the bank, and too proud to ask anyone. I was the one who went in the stores, you know, and you know how you used to have labels on things on the outside? No, they used to have, like, if you had something in a meat or whatever, they used to put the label on the outside, right? So I would go and pull the label off the one that said, you know, 59 cents, and put it on the one that was really $3, right? And I remember this sister said, "Wow, is that all that is?" I said, "Isn't that an amazing sale?" Right?
Guerrilla shopping.
And they started guerrilla shopping. You're right. You know, whatever. My sister, I could not go to my father and ask him for anything, and I got a letter in the mail from Amherst College inviting me to come up and teach, and I took it. And I remember getting these brothers who were just starting up in a business of you know, taking, you know, transferring, you know, furniture and stuff. And I got in I had a VW, right? And I put the kids in the back and whatever, and we came up and they followed us. And then they made a wrong turn, but I knew they finally would get there. When they got in there, they looked at me, and I remember taking the last, actually basically money that I had, and I said, "I want to give you a good tip. I figure I could write a check the next day at one of the banks, right? That may or might not have bounced or whatever, etc." And the brother said, "No, just give us a little bit. Do you want us to put your things upstairs on the second floor, whatever," which they did. And then I had made some food, and we sat and ate, and they said, "You know, you sure you're going to be all right, you know, little lady, here by yourself?" I said, "Yeah, this is Amherst College. Probably I'll be okay." But when they left, and I had to put the rest of the stuff up, and I started taking my books out, whatever, I cried. Every room I went in, there was a tear that I left. You know, I put the children to bed, you know, in their rooms. Every place I went, there was a tear. I left tears behind that whole place. But 6 o'clock came, and I looked out, it was getting light. I stopped crying. I wiped my eyes, got in the shower, got dressed, woke the children up, and said, "I got to get out and feed my children."
Yes.
And also, I walked into a classroom, and I saw these students who were brilliant up there at a place called Amherst College, right? And that's what you do. You reach out to those students, right? You tell them, "I am here. I will protect you against everything. I will even protect you against yourself." When some of those black students got drunk in a place called Amherst, and the cops picked them up and threw them in jail, and one of the students called me, and I went up, and I went to the jail. I said, "Where is the chief?" They said, "He's home." I said, "Call that man." He has, and I said that he has an Amherst man in jail. And I have never seen an Amherst man, be they black, white, green, purple, blue, in a jail in Amherst at all, right? And then that guy came in, and I said to him, "If you ever lock up an Amherst man," I did that on purpose. I use that language on purpose, right? You know, "you will lose your job, because this is Amherst College you're dealing with, a place where you can't get anything done without their permission." You know, but then I brought that brother to my house and gave him. I said, "Well, are you stupid?" You know, I thought you were bright.
That's what I'm talking about.
You know what I mean? I thought you were bright. You're at Amherst College. You think you have a right to go walking down? That's what he did. Walking down Amherst Street, go, "Oh, drunk." Oh, I said, "You're not white. You ever looked at your skin? Do you really think you can do this? Huh?" I said, "Thank God I'm here to take care of you." Right. I said, "Don't ever do this again." But my dear sister, I laugh and say that. But when I tell you I cried many a night, you know, because I began to think about my father. Maybe he was right. Maybe I am standing out on the ledge. Who else is on that ledge with me? You know, whatever. Maybe I am because I think we should teach this black literature you know, properly, you know, and talk about it. You know, not just teach it, you know, from thematically, but teach about what's under the economics of this black literature, the politics of this black literature, right? Huh? All of that, whatever. That's all I was doing. You know, but I did it. But I met these students who were scared, who were brilliant, right? And you were there, and you took care of them. I started feeding them every Friday night. I'm told by one of the students that they said, you know, she's a vegetarian. What could we eat at her house, right? You know. But I fried fish for them. And they came, and I made sure that all those students, I went in and told people, you don't do that. You don't give that student that grade. Who do you think you are? Right. At a place called Temple, my students in that class, because it was mostly black, they had all these great ideas. And they said, blah, blah, blah. But they went to that other class and they got quiet. One of the students came to me and she said, with tears in her eyes, she said, Professor Sanchez, a science class. The professor came in, and you know how we tie scarves around our heads? No, as black women? Right. He said, I'm so sick and tired of seeing these rags on your head. Wow. So I was grading papers. You know, we were always grading papers, and I put the paper, and I stood up and said, what did you say, my dear sister? She said, I couldn't say anything, Professor Sanchez, because I might have gotten a D. I said, well, I can guarantee you will get a D now because you didn't say anything. Wow. You know, and I stood up and said, okay, where does he live on this campus? She said, what are we going to do? And I went and reached up and got Martin Carter's book of poetry. He has a magnificent poem there about, you know, black women's hair. Right. And I said, show me. She didn't want to take me. I said, no, you're going to take me or you don't come back to my class. Where you tell everybody just how political you are, how you tell people what you do and don't do, and what you eat and don't eat, right? We went there, I knocked on the door, and he says, come in. I said, hi, I'm Professor Sanchez. How you doing? Oh, yes, Professor Sanchez. I said, you know, I just want to tell you, if you ever talk about anyone's hair, what they wear, again, you know, in class, I'm going to call a press conference and talk about the racism that goes on here at a place called Temple University. And he looked at me and said, oh, I didn't mean anything. I said, yes, you did. Right. I said, you meant everything that you said. You are tired of seeing scars on that black nappy head is what you're saying. You didn't say nappy. You just said, I'm tired of seeing the black scars on your head. You're hiding nappy hair. Right. In fact, I'm tired of seeing the nappy hair. In fact, break it down. I'm tired of seeing black folks in here in the first place. Whatever. Break it down. Why are you here in the first damn place? It used to be all white at Temple. My sister. And then I read him a poem, Martin Carter's poem about black hair. Black women's hair. Beautiful poem. Then I said, I'm going to send you a copy of this poem so you can remember it, right? And I left, right? All the way back, that sister did not walk with me. So what I'm saying is that what you got to understand is that sometimes you will be by yourself, but I will give you my number. And if you have trouble, you know, I will talk to you, and I even come talk to those people who are trying to you know, really get you out of these universities, whatever. I mean, I will do that. I have volunteered that with a lot of the young professors, and they say, oh, well, okay, Professor Sanchez. And they back away. I'm not going to go in and curse. I'm going to go in and just ask, what's the problem with her? She's brilliant. That's all. Let's have a conversation about what you do. So, yeah, I understand being scared. I understand thinking that simple, am I doing the wrong thing? I understand that around you there are other people who don't go that route, who will go this route like, I know that if I do this and do that, I'll get tenure. And then I can say something. I said, you know you won't say anything after that. You know that. I know that. You're lying, whatever. But you have to see yourself in another way. You are just like Harriet Tubman. You know, got to see that. You're just like Du Bois. Yes, you are. Yes, you is. You're just like all those people. That's what they did. You know, Du Bois never got any awards in a place called America, the most brilliant scholar of the 20th century, and no one gave him a Pulitzer. You know, no one gave, but we gave him a Pulitzer. Yeah, and the sister from UMass who taught down at, what's the college there? Not Spelman, no, it's not Spelman, it's not all men's, it's the other one. Clark. put a statue
Oh,
up.
Stephanie.
Yeah, Stephanie
Put a
Evans, yeah.
statue up to
That's right.
Du Bois.
That's right.
And I cried when I saw it. I cried. And then I asked her,
right.
I said, you know, students don't get along always. Why don't you have a peace garden here? You know, why do you put peace haku around here? So when they look at each other, right, and think they have to curse each other out and get mad and talk about, let them come and sit on a peace bench and read Toni Morrison's haku, peace haku. Read, you know, Bernice Reagan, peace haku. Read Alice Walker's peace haku, and begin to reabsorb peace again. You know, I will give you my number. I'm serious. You know, I can't tell you it'll be easy for you. It's never easy when you take that outside turn like that, my sister, you know. But the point is that it wasn't easy for those people escaping from our enslavement. It wasn't easy for our great-great-grandmothers, you know, who tried to build, right? It wasn't easy at all. It's never been easy for us. That's not the point. The point is that when we continue in that great tradition that says simply resist. You're resisting.
Hey, because of time, these are going to be our last two questions.
My big sister, Sonia.
How you doing, my dear brother? Oh.
This morning after your wonderful biopic, I told folk that you had become my big sister back there in the beginning of the Black Arts Movement. What I didn't share was two recollections I'd like to share with everybody. You at National Black Theater, about 2 or 3 dozen of us, and you come in to do a workshop, and you tell us all to close our eyes. And we close our eyes, and you hand us, going around, a grape. And at the end of passing it around, you asked each of us to creatively tell us what that experience was for us. And it was then, and at the County Cullen Workshop, that you became my big sister. Since that time, I must confess that my form has very seldom come anywhere near what it should have been given your teaching, but it has always.
Thank you. And that County Cullen Library.
It's always been my inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you.
And my brother, you need to know that in the 1960s, when I became a naturalized citizen of the African People's Republic, within a mile of my home at the Navy Yard, there were 12 black theater venues. We got work to do.
Thank you. Thank you, my dear brother.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the panel. Thank them very much for their insight, and thank the entire village for being here, because I think it creates that space. There's a person on the panel who I have a relationship with, and that's Dr. Gregory Carr. He was a teacher of mine at Howard, and one of the things he taught me in his Black Aesthetics course was a quote by Anna Julia Cooper, and it was, "When and where I enter, the whole race enters with me." The theme of this conference is Gathering at the Waters, Healing, Legacy, and Activism in Black Literature. And one of the things that I think about, especially as I canvass the room, is when we talk about the whole race entering with us and we look across the room, the whole race also includes generations. And when we talk about generations and the importance of memory, we have to talk about how do we extend the legacy across generational lines. And if we're being honest, there's a lot of healing to do there, right? So how do we extend this conversation and heal our community across generational lines, ensuring that the legacy of the Black Arts Movement lives on in the people who are in this room, but I would argue even more importantly, in the people who are not in this room, who may not feel like they belong in the room, right? Whether it's because of language or complexion or age.
I'll say this very quickly. It's good to see you, and like always, man, you and your sister, very close to my heart, man. Thelonious Monk, they said you were about penning a wrong note. The only wrong note is when you stop playing. You can always resolve it if you continue to work through it, but you can't stop. Dan Turner is here from, working in Philadelphia, the Bloxam Collection, Mr. Bloxam. By the way, Sister Cologne, nobody's rushing to get to the places where our people are. So there's always work. The Negro College will pay you hundreds of dollars a year to work. But at any rate, now I'm just thinking about what Sonia said about those places they're not going to go. There's plenty now. Now the question of what we have to do is support each other. But I'm thinking about that because I hang out with those people who don't have a lot, who've given their life to people like Charles Bloxon, who never made a lot of money. They would just buy books. Me and Mr. Bloxon got real tight. I found out how to never have any money. Just spend all your money on books. But there's a young brother there named Narayan Felix, who's working now for Diane, whose mother and aunt went to Howard back in the 80s with April and them, got caught up in their movement that they had. This young brother was raised in this work. So when he came to Temple, he's a second semester freshman. He sought out the Bloxon collection. He's in school communication, ain't got nothing to do with it. He said, but I gotta get over here because this is where the books are. And you know, Diane says, you know, he's doing well. I say he loves it. He loves y'all over there. The only thing I would say very quickly is, I'm using Narayan as this example, you just gotta be with these young people. Some of them are watching right now, they're streaming, but it's being with them. It's putting, like we did, put something in your hand, read this. Mike was talking about that earlier, before here. Put this in your hand, read it. What does it mean to you? And at Julius Cooper's house right down the street from Howard. Let's walk down here and look at it. In DC, it's easy. We got the Smithsonian's. That's our tax dollars at work, right? So we go, let's go. I call it intellectual CSI. We going to the crime scenes. Why? Because there ain't no museums in Africa. Why? Yeah, this is just the stuff y'all took. I use stuff instead of S, the other S word. But I must say motherfucker at least one more time besides the time I just said it. No, because Sister Sonia, we got to figure out a way for you to license this. Because I told Mike, we got to get a T-shirt that says, we all up for tenure, motherfuckers. I love that. I mean, I love it. But anyway, that's what young people understand. That's why they're going to see Black Panther. That's when they went to see Straight Outta Compton. They understand that there's a perpetual test. But what this shows you, and I'll end with this, is what, me and Mike were talking about this because he says every semester he shows his students Robert Williams. And I love Mabel Williams. She made transition, but I swear that woman was fine to the day she made transition. She's still fine in my mind. But, and I told her this. When Robert Williams said, I want to be like George Washington in one respect, I want to fight my revolution, go home to my farm, sit on my porch, and die of old age. Everybody didn't die in a hail of bullets. When you see Sonia Sanchez, you're looking at somebody that punched somebody in the face and lived to tell the tale. What young people love that because it shows them that you don't have to give everything. And if you stand up, all the scared people will sit down. And so being a community like we're in community, when you have that life force, you can't get that online. You can't get that. That's voice to voice. That's moment by moment. That's hours that you think you don't have. And what ends up happening is once you do that, Henry Highland Garnett says, speak and lead the rest to God. You never know what form it's going to take after that. But you know that you've done what you need to do. I think that's how you build the intergenerational bridge.
I think also Angela Davis said, freedom is a constant struggle.
Yes.
It's not an event, right? When we talk about revolution, we're not talking about an event. And I think one of the difficulties of this generation today is that the objectives are not clear. Slavery was a clear objective. That has to be ended. Jim Crow is a clear objective. That has to be ended. We need black power. That's a clear objective. And today, the objectives are not clear. There are issues that people are addressing. We got to stop the police from killing us. We got to, elect people to office. But what is the overall demand? The Black Arts Movement is a self-determination demand. We will speak for ourselves in our own voice. We will put forward our own interests as human beings. This is the most important thing Malcolm X said. Most people think it's by any means necessary. That's the end of the sentence. The beginning of the sentence is we declare our right to be a human being in this society on this day, right? Which we will bring about by any means necessary. So as Sonia posed the question, what does it mean to be a human being in the 21st century? But for young black people, what does it mean to be a human being? Because you can't be that in this country and be whole.
How about that?
See, you can't be a human being if you're forced to negate those parts of you that other people want to destroy because it nullifies the narrative that they've created about who we are. This is true. And we have allies, but alliances are based upon mutual interest, so we should not get confused. There's no permanent allies, not even inside of the black community. You understand what I'm saying? That people work together because they have mutual interests. Some of those interests extend beyond material things into spiritual things. Spiritually, we want a world where human beings, the human family can live with a mutual consciousness of our collective humanity. See, but that's not the world we live in, and so our alliances have to be based upon, can we work together around this issue? Now, for young black people, that also means an alliance with the older generation. Yes. How do we find commonality with them, and how do we find commonality with you? As elders, and it's really weird coming out my mouth, because in my head, I'm like 25 years old. That was a long time ago, though. But how do we avail ourselves as a resource? Because that's what, and Sonia and I have difficulty with this, because I keep telling her all the time, stop giving your number out in public, stop, but she won't stop, so I just stop saying it. That's right. But more importantly, she will answer your call. See, she has always been available. That thing she says about when I would call her to go someplace and it'd be dangerous, she would just say, where are we going? And I guess y'all gonna take care of it. But the point is, how do we create a situation where, as elders, we are this vast resource? You have a whole generation, actually 2 generations, of people who have deep knowledge of how to fight this system and preserve our humanity by doing it. That's why love has to be central to what we do. We love our people. We love humanity. We love the vision of a world where human beings can live, but we still have to go to war with these people who order the world to benefit a small handful of people and get another group confused that they're with them. Yeah. Poor white people have more in common with us than they do with rich white people. But whiteness in this country has more currency than being with the people whose interests align with theirs. Yep. And so that's why I said alliances are based upon mutual interest. There are moments, and I used to work in an auto factory. I was a labor organizer for several years. There are moments when their interests align with ours, and that's the moment where we can work together. And then there are moments where they put on them Halloween costumes and go to their Klan meeting. No, I saw it. Yes. You know, we need your help. Yeah, we need your help. Okay, but you know I'm gonna be shooting you tomorrow, right? So, black people have to grow up.
Yes, sir.
We're politically immature.
Yes, sir.
And we shouldn't be at this point in our history. No. So we have to encourage people to study, but we have to promote, and this is one of the great things about the Black Arts Movement artists. They were generous. When I was 17, I wrote a letter to Barack. I wanted to come to Newark to study with him. You know what his response was? If you can get here, you can be here.
Wow.
He said it more poetic than that, but that's the essence of it. If you can get here, you can be here. It changed my life. But when I don't even know when I met Sonia. She's always been in my life. And she has never failed to respond. Haki, all of these people, the generosity, but they also have high standards.
Yes, sir.
You know, it's like jazz musicians.
Yes,
you
sir.
say, you know, I want to sit in with you.
Yes, sir.
They say, all right. But after them first few notes you mess up, you got to go sit back down and do some more work before. And see, the Black Arts Movement poets, these are highly skilled, talented people who have high standards for what our art should be. So you got to come to learn. You got to come to bring. I read Sister Evie's book, Semi-Automatic, and first of all, the title is what made me buy the book. I was like,
Right.
Wait a minute, there's poems in this book? You know? Because the title said something immediately to me. This is something that is confronting a reality that harms us. It is confronting the reality from a perspective that we have the power to not only resist, but to win.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Frederick Douglass, there is no progress without struggle. Right? Those who want the crops without plowing up the ground. They want the thunder. They want the rain without the thunder and the lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a physical struggle or a moral struggle or both physical and moral, but it will be a struggle. Right. So we can't be afraid of that. We can't be afraid. And we, more than anybody in this country, we know how to do this. Yes, white people shaking in their boots about Trump.
Yes, sir.
We've been in fascism. 246 years and another 90 years of Jim Crow.
Right.
What are we afraid of?
Right.
We ultimately know that these people will be defeated. And I'm going to end with this, just so that we remember who we are. 246 years of enslavement, and not one generation of black people thought that that was our destiny. Not one. Living by the mantra, if not me, my children. That's right. If not my children, their children. Right. If not their children, their children. If not their children, their children. But one day we will be free. Mm-hmm. Now to hold on to that vision for 25 generations, never letting it go. When Jim Crow came, we knew that wasn't the end either. We have never believed the narrative that we were supposed to be the servants of the world, exploiting our labor for the benefit of others. Our humanity always speaks to us in the most difficult, and trying, and horrible, and terroristic context. We is no ways tired. Mm.
On that note, I got to end it. Let's go ahead for our panelists, moderator EversCollege, Sonia Sanchez, Greg Carr, Michael Somay. Let's give it up. Yeah. And also be reminded that their books are in the bookstore. We can get the books there. We also got a photo going to take up. Also, a few announcements I want to make just very quickly. Don't forget about tomorrow. I'm sorry, later today at 5 o'clock, there is a poetry slam competition that's going to be in the Welcome Center. Also, tomorrow morning, we start here at 10 o'clock, be here at 10 o'clock for a short film we're going to show, Living in the State of Grace, The Art of Healing, film anthology through Black Voices. And then also the presentation tomorrow at 5, the awards presentation. So that's at 5 o'clock tomorrow. We're going to be part of it. Also the workshops, you can still register for workshops that we have scheduled. The workshops, we still can register for those. And one last thing, for those who are scheduled to go to the Aquaba House for the reception, the buses are in the back. Those who are scheduled to be part of the reception, the buses are in the back. Thank you and see you on tomorrow morning.
And stay here. So where do we take this picture here? Yeah.
Great job, Eve.
Here? Not go. Here on stage. Oh, good. Yeah, but you're going to stay here. Just announce that we should go get the books and come back here.
Okay. Hey, if you bought books, you can... That's not the one. If you bought books, you can bring the books back here and get them signed. If you're buying books, you can get them signed right here.
Did you say that you were scheduled?
Yes. Yeah. Scheduled.
And you said that it was at 5?
Yeah.
No, that's got to be on the t-shirt.